Welcome, everyone. I'm Susan James, Assistant Director here at Bayless Library, and thank you for coming tonight, and thank you to David Walks-Bear for coming. Thank you to the Friends of the Library for their refreshments, and the library's program committee for their help. I wanted to mention next Tuesday is another author event, July 2nd at 7 o'clock, excuse me. Author and scientist Roy Spencer, Sioux High class of 1973, will speak about global warming, should we be worried? We're very pleased to have David with us tonight on his book tour. He's a member of the Shawnee Nation and an intertribal elder. He's a novelist who writes of his heritage and draws on his experiences working as a game warden and in law enforcement and the military. He's also a syndicated columnist who pens The Bear's Den that appears in the Great Lakes Pilot. Tonight he'll speak about his mystery set in northern Michigan. Please welcome David Walks-Bear.
Thank you very much. Okay, folks, so I know you folks just got here and that I started talking to you. I'll go the other way and start from the beginning.
As long as you
It won't be as
that.
painful for you. You get to have it more pain. Okay. Usually what I do is I'll try to start this off this way, and I'll give you a little sign language. I don't know how much you know about sign language, but do you? Okay, so that's Walks-Bear. I am Walks-Bear.
Oh.
The other way you can do this is Weseji Seji, Makwakiji, Lenanwi, Nilla. Good day. I am Walks-Bear. I am Shawnee. This is about it for me in my Shawnee language.
Ah.
There's a little that I know here and there, but like most Indians, at least Indians my age, in their 50s anyway, you don't know an awful lot about your culture because unless you were raised on the res out west somewhere, most of the reservations and the Indian cultures that existed in the East Coast and up and down, like in the Midwest here, you know, you just kind of integrated with the regular white society, so you lost an awful lot of stuff. In my case, my folks are from Tennessee. My dad was full-blooded Shawnee, and he's got, and his languages, and from his side of the family, there's all kinds of Shawnee words that are mixed in with the English words, you know, so I've always found that to be kind of interesting. I didn't know what the heck they meant most of the time. I mean, you know, poke salad, I picked a bunch of poke salad the other day, and poke is an actual, does anybody know what poke salad is?
Is it a weed or plant?
Well, some folks might call it a weed.
No, I'm sure it has a great use, but.
Well, poke is actually a Choctaw word. The word poke is Choctaw, and salad is just salad. It's
Oh,
a salad.
okay.
So it means edible green, but
Okay.
but it's wild spinach is what it is.
Okay.
And it can be toxic if you're not careful with it. But I mean, you know, poke salad Annie. Remember that song?
Yes, that was in the song.
Where it comes from? Did you know the guy that sang that song is a white guy?
Jerry Reed.
Yeah, and I didn't know that. I mean, every Saturday usually, I do elder reflections on a little nonprofit radio station. They run every day, traditional elder reflections. So these are old world things. But they're only like 2 or 3 minutes at a time. But every Saturday it's an oldies rock station that I do these elder reflections on. But every Saturday there's another radio station farther south, and I do call-in with them, so I'm on the air live. And you know, and one of the guys told me that. I said, "You gotta be kidding!" I did not know that. So little things that you learn are always fascinating for for a fat old guy like me. I have a really good time when I pick up stuff like that, and that's why I like talking to you folks too, because I will learn something from you tonight, no matter what. You probably won't get much from me, but I will learn something from you guys. So it's always nice to do this, and I appreciate y'all coming, especially when it's rainy like it is out there tonight. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about me. You don't want to hear too much, but I'll tell you a little bit about me and how I got into this. I spent 21 years in the Coast Guard, in the Coast Guard Reserve as a photojournalist, but I was a boat crewman. I did an awful lot of law enforcement and a lot of other stuff too. So an awful lot of active duty, 30 days, 45 days, just those kinds of things throughout my 21 years. But we had 5 kids who wanted to eat all the time, it seemed like, on a regular basis. And most of my, I didn't understand it either. Yeah, they wanted shoes and stuff. But anyway, am I doing okay? My wife usually tells me when I gotta talk loud.
As long as they're up front, you're doing okay.
This is why I bring the domestic boss. So anyway.
Oh, that's who that is.
That's who that is. Yeah. So anyway, primarily I worked as a park ranger, park manager, forest firefighter. I worked as a deputy sheriff, as a marine deputy. I mean, I worked for the Forest Service as a team leader in Alaska. I mean, all these. I worked with recreational law enforcement outdoors. Primarily, that's what I did. when I wasn't working as a cop or whatever, it was because those kids wanted to eat all the time that I had to find something else to do. Well, I'd been trained and I like to write and I like shooting pictures, so I started writing, freelance. I wrote for Michigan United Conservation Club Outdoors. I wrote for Outdoor Life, for Field and Stream, for wherever I could spend a penny, and make a couple bucks. That's what I was doing. So, for the most part, I started stringing for the Muskegon Chronicle. Hi, how you doing, man? Come on in and have a sit down. Oh, you're not gonna hurt a thing.
Sorry, I'm late.
You're so late.
He doesn't speak loudly.
Anyway, so I was writing for the Muskegon Chronicle, and I was writing for 2 or 3 other newspapers, wherever I could make a couple bucks to keep the kids in shoes, because they always cried about food and stuff. Anyway, my domestic boss, her name is Maureen. She was a bookmobile librarian. She was a librarian, but she ran the bookmobile for the most part. She wrote me all the time, was constantly talking to me about writing a novel. I had no idea, how to write a novel. For the most part, I can tell you right now that I can't spell my name unless I look at my driver's license. It's that bad with me. All I know how to do is tell a story. If you like the story, that's fine with me. If you don't, that's fine with me too. I just like to tell a story. What happens with that process, I'll get into in a minute, but basically, that's what I was doing. Working law enforcement more or less, and then freelancing as a writer. And I finally came to a position in my little game warden occupation where I was running around at night driving a patrol area, a 600-acre parcel, and we had a little patrol station set up there. So once you get a handle on the poaching and the timber theft and the illegal dumping, that kind of stuff, once you get a handle on that, there's really not too much to do except drive around the woods. See the little lights reflect back at you at night, or during the daytime you're seeing a turkey here, and a deer there, a rabbit here. And it's okay if you're simple-minded. That's me, I really like that job. But I did have time to do something. And so she said, find something that you want to write about and write this novel. She really thought I could do it. Well, I don't know if it's been done or not, but I wrote the novel anyway. And then when I got done with it, she said, now you got to find a publisher. You got to send this out, you got to do this, you got to... I wrote the book, you do what you want to do with it. So we went back and forth with that for a while. Finally, we decided to just go ahead and self-publish the book. And that was the very first one. It was called The Murmurings. And in that book, I created the character Eli Stone. And it's a contemporary book, meaning that it's going on right now, right? I mean, it's not, but it has to do with an old Michigan mystery, a 1953 Michigan mystery. Everybody knows about Ken Ross, right? He used to be in Air Force Base. Yeah.
We're from Kishlo.
Oh, are you? Kishlo, yeah, there. Okay. So in November 23rd, 1953, we were at the very beginning. I won't get into the whole thing about this book in case you want to read it sometime, but at the beginning of the Cold War. At this point in time, we didn't have intercontinental ballistic missiles. We didn't have those kinds of things. It was just going to be like the Enola Gay, except that we had B-47s, But it wasn't going to be missiles taken off from here to go over there. It was going to be bombers, and we were scared to death because the Russians had finally got their nuclear weapons. So every base across the northern part of the United States, every base had a combination of fighter aircraft and bombers. That was something that it just happened at every base, every Air Force base all across the nation. Ready to go up on a minute's notice because we expected the Ruskies to be flying over any second to bomb us. And that's, radar wasn't that great. It was pretty good, but it wasn't that great back in those days. So what happens in this book, and what actually happened in true history, is that on the night of November 23rd, 1953, the Air Force has documented in their actual accident report that one F-89 took off from Ken Ross Air Force Base, and it was on an intercept mission. It was going up to shoot down what they were pretty sure was a Russian bomber. It was flying over Lake Superior, about 40 miles northeast of the Upper Peninsula, and it was flying at like 600 miles an hour, back and forth, which is really odd for a bomber back in those days because they didn't fly anywhere close to that fast. The only thing that could fly that fast was a fighter, and it pretty much had to be on a downhill glide when it's doing that. So whatever it was sent up to get this bomber, and it was an air defense mission. When they classify something like that, that means it's going up to shoot it down. So all across the lower peninsula and all across Wisconsin, there were these little Air Force guys sitting around these radar globes, and they were actually watching these globes. And you got a dot here, and the little thing spins around, and it goes beep. And then you got this F-89 that's shooting toward it on an air defense mission to shoot this thing down, because it's a Russian bomber, or at least that's what they think it is. They called it a UA back in those days, unidentified aircraft. So it got about 10 miles from this unidentified aircraft, And all of a sudden, the unidentified aircraft shot across the sky and merged with the F-89, and the F-89, and it just kind of went together, kind of just a single blob. And then it just kind of disappeared. That's what it says in the Air Force report. When you dig deeper in the Air Force report, you find that that blob where the two things had merged actually disappeared. It shot straight south and disappeared over Lake Michigan. But I tell you this because this is true history. You can get on the internet and find it. You can go through the archives, which is what I did. You can find this. So all of these people, these eyewitnesses, U.S. Air Force personnel, enlisted guys, not officers, you know, all across Michigan and Wisconsin, seeing this thing happen. What you don't hear about in the actual official accident report, all this is also documented in the accident report, is that on that same night, I heard about it after this book came out. I had 2 or 3 emails from guys that were actually stationed at Truax Air Force Base, which is over in Wisconsin. And 45 minutes after that jet disappeared, its wingman crash landed there. Now I tell you all of this because that's the history that's in this book. And Eli Stone is a contemporary tribal cop. He retired from the Coast Guard. And he takes a job finally with the Black River Band of Pukasqua, and he gets involved and tied up in that kind of a mystery. And so that's what I'm telling you about, I guess, and let you know how that works. But what happened that night in reality, on the November 23rd, 1953, actually changed the way that NATO and all of the United States and the other countries that are in NATO fought the Cold War. So it changed the course of history to a degree.
Wow.
I find that fascinating, so I get a kick out of it. Excuse me. So anyway, that's what Eli Stone is doing there, and then the character's introduced, and he's over by the Yellow Dog River. The Black River Band of Pukasqua just got their federal recognition, so it's all of this coalescing, and the Indians who were intermixed within the white culture learning how to come back together and become Indians again. So there's a lot of that going on in this book, and so this book then, I just set it up for the heck of it. I never planned on writing another one, but You're married, buddy, you know what I mean, don't you? Anyway, so I set it up in here for the...
I'm not going to comment on
You're
that.
sitting too close, ain't you? You're sitting too close. Yeah. Well, anyway, so I set it up in that book because I like history so much. I set it up for old money, just in case I ever got around to writing it. Well, at the time that I finished the Murmurings. Shortly after that, I didn't tell you this, but one of those stints of active duty that I did was over in Hawaii, in the Big Island of Hawaii. I'd been stationed with a guy out in San Francisco, and he was from the Big Island. And man, we'd go on liberty together. He was married, he didn't chase. I was married, and I didn't chase, so we hung out together. So we would we'd go out to Alcatraz, and we'd hit Chinatown and dink around. I just got along with him really well, and Jesus, stories he would tell me about what it was like growing up on that island. I just couldn't hardly believe it, And so I put in a dream sheet. I said, hey, I was writing for the U.S. Coast Guard Reservist magazine at that time, and so I said, hey, you guys ever getting duty for Hawaii, especially the Big Island? Give me a bump. I'll take that. And so they called me one day and said that they had a story over there, and they needed somebody. They had reservists on board the Kiska 95-footer out of Hilo on the Big Island of Hawaii. And they said they had billeting, I could go and I take one other person, wife or girlfriend, whatever I do. And I said, I'll take wife this time, girlfriend next time. That's what we'll do. So that was how that came to be. Well, man, I got over there, just exactly like he described it. I don't know if any of y'all have ever been to Hawaii or not. Has anybody ever been? If you ever go, you rent a car and you drive out into the country. And you go to these little tiny villages, little quaint villages where life pretty much is like it was 50, 60, 70 years ago. Don't go to Waikiki. You can go there, that's fine. It's just all touristy stuff. If you really want to see what it's like, you need to rent a car and get out and talk to the people. It's like one big Indian reservation in a lot of ways. Everything's family day. On a Sunday, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we really liked it. We bought 20 acres over there. We found it was pretty cheap. 20 acres like 2,000 acres back here in Hawaii because the government owns everything. Very expensive, but we just got lucky. The Master of Life was smiling at us big time, and so we got lucky. And then while I was over there putting a road in on that 20 acres, she called me and said, "Hey, there's a house just popped up on here." So it was another house. It had been gutted, stripped, but it was only $40,000, and it had county water. It's a big deal, man. Over there, they don't have any wells. It's like Alaska. Excuse me. Everything is catchment system, unless you got county water or city water, we call it here. And so anyway, that's what was going on. So I fixed up that house, the little 3-bedroom house. We got that, and I had the 20-acre house, so that was going pretty good. And we rented that house out as what's called a vacation rental. You folks have all heard about those before, right? You have a house and you rent it out for a week or whatever. And I called it the banana house because I painted it yellow with green and white trim on all the windows. really banana yellow is actually what the paint was called. And so they still have the same color over there, I guess. But so I had time in between. I was over there by myself. My son and my nephew would come over and work with me sometimes or whatever, but I had time, so I started writing this novel there. And there's an interesting piece of history in that. In fact, there's a lot of pieces of history now. But has anybody ever heard of the CSS Shenandoah before? No, I can tell right now. CSS Shenandoah, Confederate State Ship Shenandoah.
Oh, the one that disappeared in Mississippi?
No. One that disappeared in Mississippi. You're not thinking about the Alabama, right?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, that was Clyde Cussler's guy. Yeah. No, see, the Shenandoah, the Confederate Navy, during the war didn't have much of anything. And you guys all know what U-boats are, right?
Right,
Okay,
yeah.
so in World War I, you had the Germans, really developed the technology for the U-boat, but they also did that, expanded on the technology of what's called a privateer. Sir Francis Drake was a privateer. Remember Sir Francis Drake, from... Yeah, privateer means that,
Private, he's
yeah, it's a
he's
private
with a
ship.
license.
Yeah, right. Or less so, you give them, the king would give them a charter and they could go out and in the name of England, rob and be a pirate, that type of thing. Well, a raider is different in the sense that it's actually a naval vessel that belongs to that foreign entity. And in the case of Germany during World War I, they sent out these ships that were they looked like a freighter or something. And as another ship got closer to them, they would all of a sudden change, drop this hatch and pull all this stuff up, big guns come out, throw more ship all of a sudden. And so that was what the Germans did a lot in World War I. But during the World War, or during the Civil War, there was the CSS Alabama, and USS, United States ship, CSS, Confederate States ship. Okay, the CSS Alabama is the one that Clyde Cussler found and did all the different stuff with. But they were raiders, basically. They didn't have any support. There's no, like today we have big aircraft carrier and all these destroyers and submarines that are protected at aircraft carrier. This was one ship out in the middle of nowhere. They're all wearing Navy uniforms, and it's not like they're incognito or anything, but they got nothing. Well, her job, the Secretary of the Navy for the Confederacy, set the CSS Shenandoah on a job to totally cripple the Union. And in 1865 and 1864, right up until 1865 in fact, the whole world pretty much lit its night with whale oil. Does everybody know that, more or less? But I mean, if you went out to the barn at night, check on the animals, you carried a lantern, it was being lit with whale oil. That's what it was. His job, and at the time too also, in 1865, the United States produced about 75% of all the whale oil produced in the world. So Waddell was the captain of the Shenandoah, and his mission was to destroy the northern whaling fleet. That was his mission. And that's what he did. That's absolutely what he did. And so because of what happened there, that changed the course of world history. And by that, we had to find another way to light your night. That's how kerosene came into being. So by the time you're watching Matt Dillon going out to look in the barn and with his kerosene lantern, it's because of the CSS Shenandoah. But that true mystery exists there, and I found also that Mark Twain, one of my favorite guys, he actually lived in Hawaii for a while, and he disappeared for about 6 weeks and nobody knows where he went. So I tied him into that, plus another little mystery. There was one of the whale ships that was, if you go to my website, actually, you can find a lot of this stuff on the PhotoFacts page. A girl who was going to the University of Hawaii at that time. She was she was a doctoral candidate, an underwater archaeologist. She had actually dove on this whale ship that the Shenandoah sunk, and she interviewed all the people who were still members of the family that were there. So I get a kick out of all that stuff. So all that stuff I get to wrap into the story one way or another. But this particular ship that was called the Harvest, the whale ship Harvest, she had been flying the U.S. flag, but she was actually a ship that was licensed to the Sandwich Islands, which is what Hawaii used to be called. And everybody knows probably that there were only two states in the Union that actually used to be foreign countries all by themselves, right? You know about Texas being the Republic of Texas. And then Hawaii was the other one, the Sandwich Islands, own nation. Anyway, so Eli Stone, because of a deal that he makes in this book, he gets a piece of property and the band sends him over there. And he gets tied up in all that stuff I just told you about. All of these books have a lot of American Indian, traditional American Indian spirituality going into them. But with this one, you get into a little Hawaiian mysticism too. So you got the Milohini. Anybody heard of the little people? Okay, so you got that going on there. Anyway,
What do they call them in Hawaii?
the Minohihi. you're talking about the little people. They're leprechauns. They're leprechauns, just like
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. They're the same thing. This little person right here is Memegweshe. Memegweshe, little person, water spirit. Every Indian nation has little people in it, little spirits, whatever. But the Minohihi, is that how you say that? The older I get, the rougher I have. Anyway, I can look it up in the book, I suppose. But in a long story short, though, that's what happens with old money is that Eli Stone gets over there and he gets tangled in that, and also terrorism, that's going on right now. So you got a lot of modern stuff happening to him, but the biggest thing that's going on in this book that confounds him totally is that because of poor Eli Stone, I didn't tell you this, but he's when he comes back and he comes back to the UP after he spends his 20 years as a Coast Guard intelligence agent, and he comes back to the UP, and he's fine to just not do anything else but just sit there and hunt and fish anymore, But the holy man of the tribe is a fellow named Amos Red Deer, and so he pulls him in, tells him that he's the not the land director, but the way leader, the pathfinder, the way leader, and so for the people. So he gets involved doing this, and because of that, all the things that have happened to him in his life, as far as the spiritual things that have happened, his nickname is Ghost. He survived an awful lot of things he shouldn't survive. Different things that have happened to him over the time. He's having all these things happen to him anew. He's like 40 years old, and holy crap, all this stuff is hitting him type thing. When he gets into old money, he has a little conundrum that comes to him that's called visiting with the grandfathers. And visiting with the grandfather, you've heard of that before? Yeah? No?
I've seen a painting.
Oh, have you?
I
Okay.
forget where. So when you said that, kind of brings that back.
Does it? Okay, so he's actually seeing things through his great-grandfather's eyes. So what's happening to him today, he may be in the present right here, but he's actually seeing something that his great-grandfather seen 100 years ago. Kind of mind-boggling for him. But all these things, believe it or not, they actually do kind of tie together and come together. I had one lady who really liked Eli Stone a lot. She liked Eli Stone an awful lot. She did an Amazon review. She wasn't interested in anybody else but Eli Stone. She didn't like all the ships and the rest of that stuff. She liked Eli Stone. But if you like the stories and the way they come together, then it works out okay. But it all does eventually come together and tie up. It's just that it takes a lot to get there sometimes, I guess, for me. But I enjoy telling the story. For me, it's all about all the little facets because there's so much that happens to us every day. No matter who you are, if you're a two-legged, everything that you do, no matter what you do, you're going to touch somebody else. It's all part of the circle. Somebody else is going to touch you. It's all part of the circle. Within the visiting with the grandfathers, he's down here at the bottom of the circle, touching his great-grandfather who's way up here. I get goosebumps when I think about that. But spiritually, that's the way that it works, So the Great Mystery does all kinds of things in our life, and I find those things fascinating, so I stick them in there. If it's not too boring, you're okay. If it is, I'm stuck. And so are you, I guess. But anyway, so that's how old money comes to be. And then right after I got that book done, my domestic boss comes down with leukemia. Screws up everything. And she ain't cheap to keep. I'll tell you that right now. She ain't cheap to keep. But so she came down with leukemia, so I got out of the writing biz for a while, and she's doing really well right now. She went through a bone marrow transplant. She went back to school, became an RN. Really proud of her, and she pays me to say that kind of stuff. So you got to pay your neighbor to come down here. I got to pay her. Anyway, so I just started writing the Whittiku before she got sick. Whittiku the Shapeshifter, and that's this book right here. So this one. And is anybody, did I ask you folks in here if you'd heard of the Dogman before? I was asking you that before these other folks come in, right? Okay, so the Michigan Dogman, when I did my research on this, the legend of the Michigan Dogman goes all the way back to the 1700s in white culture. Oral history for the people of the Three Fires, the Chippewa, Ottawa, Potawatomi, goes back forever. It's all oral culture there, oral story. Anyway, the Dogman. Michigan Dogman existed in Michigan with that title, but you'll find them in just about every Indian culture, no matter what, no matter where. And I can tell you a little bit of a story about this one, I guess. And I don't know if I'm doing okay for time, right? So a little bit of a story about a Dogman. Has anybody ever heard of the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers? Oh, have you? Okay. Here's a little story that I actually put in this book. I put a lot of little stories like this in my books because to me they're fascinating. Again, I hope they are to you folks, but sometimes maybe not. Within the culture of American Indians, so Dogman is not what people think it is. If you knew, and since a lot of you folks have not heard of the Michigan Dogman before, downstate and down in Trollville is an awful lot of this eat 'em up monster type stuff. The Sci-Fi Channel will spit out a movie every other week, about some monster doing this or some monster doing that. In American Indian culture, traditional American Indian culture, and I need to specify that because I'm an American Indian. It doesn't mean I'm not a Native American, but then I know you folks are all Native Americans too. So there are a lot of Indians that like the term Native American better than they do Indian. I'm fine with either one, but I call myself an Indian. So from a traditional Indian point of view, the Dogman is not like that. The Dogman is a spiritual entity, and it's not what you would think it would be. Kind of sounds spooky though, doesn't it? When you think of the werewolf type thing, maybe. But so here's a little story. Everybody probably knows. Most of you folks in here are old enough to know that before the West was actually won, it was a battleground. I mean, there was war going on out there. Everywhere you went. The Indians didn't like the whites, and the whites didn't like the Indians. There really wasn't too much in between or gray area there. There was an actual war going on. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about this guy. And this fella went out there and he had cousins, I think 2 brothers that went with him initially. And he was kind of like a mountain man. He was hunting meat for the Army. Shoot buffalo, elk, whatever he could kill, the Army would pay him for it. He was a hunter. And so, but this guy lost an awful lot of his family and many of his friends to Indians. Well, of course, the Indians were losing people too, But anyway, he didn't have any kindness in his heart whatsoever for the red man. Didn't like him, hated him desperately. So we finally get to the point where, you said you had mentioned, sir, you knew who the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers were. You've heard of them before anyway. Before I get too much farther in this little story, then I should tell you that the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers were like the Green Beret of the Cheyenne Nation. And everybody knows what the Green Beret is, right? Special Forces. Okay, so the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers, they carried a dog pen or peg. And did anybody have any idea what that might be for? Well, you know what the Green Beret is for, right? Signifies, something, Barry Sadler sang with the Ballad of the Green Beret. So the dog peg, something that all Plains Indians had to have with them, because when you're basically out in the middle of nothing but grassland, you get off your pony, you got 2 choices, Either hang on to your pony all night, tie him to your leg, or hobble. It's not good to hobble a horse. It's not, by hobble a horse, where you tie a rawhide around their legs, they can't go very far. So what you wanted to do is you wanted to give your horse a little bit of free rein, and at the same time let him graze a little bit. So you had this peg, and it would actually be about that long or whatever. You'd find a rock, and you'd drive that peg into the ground, and lace the rawhide through it, and tie your horse to it. And you'd have about 100 foot or 50, 75 foot or whatever. He'd go in a circle and graze all night long, if that's what he wanted to do, while you slept. So the next morning you would get up and get your pony, and off you would go. That's how they staked their horses at night. But this dog peg became the symbol, or the Green Beret, for the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers. They were the elite. What they would do when they got into a fight and they're protecting their people, whatever, they're a rear guard force or whatever, they would drive that peg into the ground and attach it to their hip, and then they would fight in that circle, that circumference, until their death. They would hold their ground. So that's kind of the mystique. So they used their dog pegs were super decorated or whatever. It's like your ribbons on a soldier or airman, sailor, or whatever. So that's who they were. And what happened was that in this battle that I was talking about, this white guy who had went out there and became a scout for the Army, he hated the Indians. We hated him. Too many of his friends had been killed. Had no love whatsoever for the Indians. So the Battle of Summit Springs, there were like 52 or 53 Cheyenne, most of them women, children, and old men. There were only like 8 or 10, dog soldiers or braves, warriors that were, physically able to fight at that time. So the 5th Cavalry, he's a scout for them. They have a reporter from a newspaper with them, and then the rest of the troops, they're all dismounted, and they're sneaking up on these guys. And they're taking shots at them. These Indians, if they were to put their pegs in the ground, they're going to die right where they stand or whatever they got to do if they're going to stay there. Now, before I go a whole lot farther with that, I should tell you that totems. Has anybody ever heard of totems before? You know what a totem is, right? Well, with traditional American Indians, you find a creature in the wild that you specifically and especially admire, and you try to become as close to that creature as you possibly can. And it doesn't mean that if you're like porcupines, you start sticking needles in your back. And I'm not saying that. But what I'm trying to get at is that that with the dogmen, they found the wolves and coyotes, fox, whatever, anything in that canine area they found especially intriguing and an awful lot to admire. So you try to get as close to them as you possibly can in all manners and in all ways. Now spiritually, when you get into this, the holy side of this, you can actually shapeshift if you get close enough. Okay, so now we're going outside the reservation anyway, but I'm just saying, that's kind of how you do this, and that's where the shape-shifting comes into being within the traditional culture. So this is, you'll find this an awful lot, especially in the traditional cultures. But so the Battle of Summit Springs, we're back to this White Scout again, hates Indians. The troopers are all sneaking up on the dog soldiers. They're returning their fire or whatever, trying to get the women and children, the old men across the creek there. And this particular scout, this White Scout, he's been shooting at this one Indian in particular, and the guy jumped behind a rock and back and forth. And finally, this big yellow dog jumps out, but that's okay. He just keeps shooting, and then he doesn't get any fire anymore. And he's pretty sure that he thought he'd hit the guy anyway. He's pretty sure he's dead. Well, by the time he gets up there, there's nobody behind the rock, and no place that the Indian could have went. That's all you really know about this, because although he gave that account to the reporter, and it's actually recorded, about 2 or 3 little sentences about that long, there's a whole bunch of other actual paragraphs from the other troopers who've seen the same thing at the Battle of Summit Springs. But now here's the irony in this little story. That guy's name, that White Scout's name, was Buffalo Bill Cody. And if you know who he was, if you know who Buffalo Bill Cody was, man, he liked the Indians after that. He would never talk about this again, except in private counsel with Indians. He would never talk to a white reporter again. He wouldn't talk to any white people about it. But if you notice, like I said, he went from hating Indians to having Sitting Bull and Sioux and the rest of them within his Wild West show. So I'm just trying to convey, I guess, that it's those kinds of things that a lot of folks, especially Hollywood, but especially Hollywood, that misconstrue an awful lot. So that book has got the dog man in it, and that's kind of what the little background on the dog man and what he actually is. It's not what you think he is. It's not a terrible thing. Now, on the other hand, the Whitaku, it's a terrible thing. How about Wendigo? Has anybody ever heard of Wendigo before? You've heard of Wendigo? Okay. So all language, all woodland Indian language is based on the Algonquin tongue. Okay, so just like French is based on Latin and Spanish is based on Latin. Okay, well, my people's tongue is based on the Algonquin. Chippewa, Ottawa, Sioux, Fox, they're all based on the Algonquin tongue. Even Blackfoot, which were originally Chippewa. My great grandmother was Blackfoot. They were Chippewa until they got the horse and could move, and they went out west. So anyway, Whitaku is the same as a Wendigo, and it's a native witch. It would be anything that Hollywood could do, and then some. So it's very nasty. It's a cannibal. Not pretty. So the background on Whitakus are in every Indian culture, from one side of this land to the other, from north to south. Even in the very southern South American cultures, you'll find references to it. Although a lot of people may think that it's just the Indians themselves, but only because that's sacrifice stuff I'm talking about. But anyway, so the Whitaku, the shapeshifter, is poor Eli Stone. After he comes back from Hawaii, he's fishing the Yellow Dog River, catches this big trout that he's been after for a while. He just catches that trout and he feels this hot canine breath on his neck. Where that's coming from, but it's kind of spooky. And so that begins it for him. And then shortly after that, he gets a call from his old teammate, his old boss, now a major general in the army over in Iraq. I think he's in Iraq at that time. Anyway, so that begins the Whitaku, and the dog man kind of traces in there too. But you get a feeling for what the dog man actually is versus what Hollywood and other people say that he is. And nobody says anything about the Whitaku. There's a lot of crap out there about the Wendigo, but the bottom line is that Eli Stone has to deal with something that he's never had to deal with before, so he perseveres and gets through it. And then he moves on from that, and that'll be this book that I'm writing right now. As far as the Eli Stone series is concerned. This one's called Lucifer's Wedge when I get it out. So we'll see how that goes. I'm having a blast writing it though. It's a really fun story. I had so much fun telling these stories. I had so much fun doing the research, and I have a really good time talking to you folks too. So with Lucifer's Wedge, this particular book, I don't know who I was telling about earlier, was I talking to you folks? Yeah. Okay. So Lucifer's Wedge is set on Grand Bahama Island, with the Eli Stone series, the way that I ended up doing it is, one of them's in Michigan, the next one's set someplace else, the next one's in Michigan, the next one's set someplace else. So with Lucifer's Wedge, shortly after the leukemia kid back there came out of when she came home, that's all she wanted to do was watch westerns. So she was a leukemia kid. And her 16-year-old was in a bad car accident, so I called her,
Goodness.
yeah, Butch Crashty, I called her, Butch Crashty, leukemia kid. So anyway, she really wanted to do something with, I'm getting ahead of myself again, ain't I? All right. So when she first got through this and she wasn't neutropenic anymore, neutropenic meaning that she has no immunity to anything. We're watching TV and somebody sneezes on the program, she catches the cold.
Right.
So it was that bad. But she did really well, like I said. And so we went to the Bahamas. We had an old deal, and I stayed had a veterans gig down there. So we stayed at Xanadu Hotel. Xanadu Hotel is where Howard Hughes had a penthouse.
Ooh. But this is many years later.
Well, we like to think that.
I'm just saying the hotel has seen its day.
Oh, it's not as fancy, you don't think?
Oh yeah, we went to the penthouse. We weren't supposed to, we did. Anyway, so in Lucifer's Wedge, though, like I was saying earlier, ma'am, and to you folks, there's 40 or 50 miles between Grand Bahama Island and the coast of Florida. That's called the Golden Alley. And the reason that was called the Golden Alley is that all of those Spanish galleons, after they plundered all the silver and the gold, had to sail through there to make a right and head back east on the slipstream to go back to Europe. So the pirates would lay right off the tip of West End. It's a little village there, and the very west end that faces Florida. They'd lay off there. Too shallow in there. That's what Grand Bahama actually means, shallow waters.
No.
And so, but she would lay right off, the pirates would lay off there, and so they would attack the galleons that come through. Blackbeard, one of them, Anyway, so that's where the history starts, and then it moves from that to, like I said earlier, it moves from that to the Tories, all the British Tories here.
Yeah.
The 1600s, you got the pirates. 1700s, you got all the British Tories that have to leave here, and the Loyalists. They got to go someplace, so there's already a little bit of a British influence down there, so they developed the village of West End in Grand Bahama. And then you move into the 1800s, and you got the Civil War. Rhett Butler, running the blockade. Well, all those supplies would come from Europe. They would go right to Grand Bahama Island, West End, offload there, and the blockade runners would load up, and then they'd run the Union Gauntlet, taking the supplies in for the South. And so you got from that you go into the Prohibition in the 1900s. So you got Prohibition, and we actually, when we were down there, actually went to. There was Al Capone was down there a little bit. He was a part owner in a saloon. It was right, and the old caretaker, the old black guy, big, tall, skinny guy. He was caretaker at the church, but he took me down and showed me the ruins. It's all ruins there now. Hey, show it. Okay, show you, man. Come on, I'll show you. Right where Al Capone, carved his initials in the back. He had to pull stuff out of the way, so I don't think it was like some neighbor kid went out and did it. And there's no tourism there, to speak of where I was at, where we were doing this research. So. It's fascinating. Now it's all drugs that's going on down there. But there's all of that history that's there. And the reason for this cover, I found the cover, and I really like that for me. I think she's pretty. But the reason for this cover is that 85%, like I was saying, 85% of the Bahamas is black. The population's black, 85%. And yet there's a legend for 8 Mile Hole on Grand Bahama Island of a blonde Caucasian mermaid.
Wow.
That goes back to the 1500s. So where did she come from? I get a kick out of that kind of stuff. So, and Lucifer's Wedge, same as Drabble's Triangle. That's how Indians say it, Lucifer's Wedge. But they've always had that. And, when you start doing the research for this stuff and get into the deep things, you'll find this. But the Indians have called it Machimanatu. That's a devil for us, Machimanatu. So that's his wedge. Same thing as Devil's Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle. So, and anyway, we got that one going on right now. Before I get off that too far, and I'll talk about the other little books that are on the side. This one's not been published yet, and it's Message from the Water Spirit. Meme Gweshe, to the people of Three Fires up here. Meme Gweshe is the water spirit. If you folks have ever heard about him at all, it's usually as a trickster. He'll tip a canoe over or something like that. It's traditionally and culturally, it's a lot more than that. But all you ever hear is the little things, It's like when we were kids growing up, everybody remember this, woo, 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 woo.
Oh, yeah.
That's how Indians made noise, That's how I made noises in India. That's what we did. But obviously Indians didn't do that. And it's kind of hard to shoot a bow, hang on to your reins, to your horse, and go woo, woo, all the same time. So anyway, but anyhow, Has anybody read Tony Hillerman in here?
Yeah, I have.
You have? Okay. So this is a companion series I just started. This book's not been published yet. This is my first reader's copy. You see that probably right there. I just got this back before we came on this little tour. So I've got like 5 or 6, I guess 7 maybe, readers that when I get a novel done, I send it to them, and then they read it and tell me what they think of this character, what they think. And I ask them questions, what do you think about that? And I don't know how many other authors do that. But I don't write from an outline either. Once I get the story in my fat little head, it just bounces around there from one pointy ear to the other, just bouncy, bouncy, bouncy. And I just want to tell the story in the worst way. So this one, I had an agent at the time who has since retired on me since I got the book. Not But so I got to find another agent and send this book out to her. But she wanted something that was like 90,000 words or less, and she wanted to we have all kinds of Indian mysticism in it. Indian mysticism to me is spirituality, so yeah, it just is. So, it's the difference between a myth and a legend. Like the legend of the dog man, a legend has a basis in fact. Myth has no basis in fact. So if somebody says, well, it's a myth, you say, okay, it probably is. But if somebody says that's a legend, then somewhere, somehow, there was a grain of truth to that. It started with truth. So mysticism, okay. But legend, or spirituality, those are true things for me. Anyway, so this particular book, though, is now he's the way leader. And there was a TV series. Did I talk about the TV series? No, I talked about the TV series. Okay. So we're writing these books, and I was building these houses over in Hawaii. I'm going back to that point in time. And we were 50 years old at that time. We were the same age. And she was walking 6 miles a day in perfect health, and I figured it'd be me getting popped on a traffic stop some night. If one of us was going to go, it'd be me, But I came home from work one day, and she was deathly ill. I mean, just that we had 5 kids, and there were only 2 left at home. They were teenagers, and I had to carry her out to the Jeep, drive 40 miles south, and she yelped the whole way. She's not the kind of person to do that. And 99% of her bone marrow was leukemias. It was a medical miracle. All the lung interns were standing there staring at her, with their little clipboards, and she didn't know what they were. But she should have been dead with that much. But this was the master of life and his miracle that he does, and that he did for us anyway. So she went into remission pretty fast, and then the doctor we had was a good Jobika, our word for doctor. It was a good Jobika, and he said, I know that she's in remission, I know that everything's fine, Dave, but between you and me, she needs to have a bone marrow transplant. It's not necessary. Everybody will tell you that medically I'm wrong. She's in remission, leave her alone. Just saying between you and me. I didn't know the guy. But this is the way the master of life works, if you pay attention. So anyway, I said, we'll do it. She said, I don't care, whatever. So we went through but by doing that, she went down to where she was fine and in remission. She had a 7% chance of making it through that bone marrow transplant. But it's the type of thing that comes back, and when it comes back, it's almost always fatal. So you put your faith in God, the Creator. You put your faith in Him, and you hope, you trust, you pray, And if you're doing what's right, and if you are doing something, or He expects you to do something, then it comes out and it works for you. So that's what happened with that situation. And while we were going through the bone marrow transplant over in Detroit, I had emails coming in from my readers. I would check my column, email. Am I doing okay, Sue? Okay. I check my column and say, hey, there's a new TV series on. It's called Eli Stone. It's an awful lot like your books, man. Well, every day with her it was life and death, and I could care less about any of this kind of stuff. And basically, for me, this is just a sideline. I had properties going in Hawaii. I was going to write full-time and retire there. And then she was going to run the bed and breakfast. We had it all planned out. But otherwise, I was working as a game warden, detective, captain. I got officers behind me that I got to take care of. I got vehicles. I got stuff to do. This is fun. It's nice going and talking to you folks and writing the books, but I can really care less about any of the notoriety or any of that kind of thing. Anyway, I had a law firm from Traverse Legal in Traverse City contacted me, and they said, look, we've heard about this and whatever, and we checked it out, and it does look like ABC and Disney is actually using your books. And I said, okay, well, I can't afford to pay attention right now, much less pay a lawyer. I'm sorry, buddy. And he said, no, we're willing to take the case on contingency. And I said, well, okay. What is it, on contingency, meaning that if you win, you get something. If you don't, I don't pay it. And he said, that's basically it. I said, okay, well, yeah, let's go. And so they sent them a letter, then they sent ABC and Disney a letter, and 7 days after they received the letter, they canceled the series. Wow. But the series was doing really well. So, and I looked at it once we got back home, and she started coming out of this and everything. Well, there's no 2 ways around it, man. They actually did use these books. They had a Chinese guy for Amos Red Deer, the holy man. They had, and it was actually called Eli Stone.
Oh my gosh.
Well, there was do you remember Have Gun Will Travel?
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, well, when the lawyers were doing all their research on this, the guy who wrote Have Gun Will Travel, the guy who wrote the book and created the character of Paladin, he was a rodeo clown from New Jersey. He retired, and he'd written these books, and he created the character and all the rest of the stuff. Well, and then all of a sudden, CBS has got Have Gun Will Travel. He said, hey! So he sued him, and he didn't win the first time, and then he sued him again, and he won. But
Wow.
they just buy it. But from what I gather and what I learned, they do this a lot. So, but anyway, in my case, they dropped it, and we were just coming out of everything, and I'm fine with that. But right now, we'll see. I'm not worried about it as long as they don't do it anymore. But the guy who started it was Johnny Miller, Herman Miller, what's his name? Something Miller. He's when they canceled that TV show, it's called Eli Stone, and then he's in a new TV show now called Elementary. It's about Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yeah.
And so he started in Eli. He was Eli Stone.
Well,
They changed stuff
now,
around
if
all
they
the
could just
time.
give you all the money from it, this would be good.
Might would have helped before the $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And she ain't cheap to keep, I ain't lying. But yeah, they changed stuff around though. They had him be a lawyer, not a tribal cop, and he wasn't Indian, but the little Chinese guy was his holy man was my Amos Red Deer, and he was called a pathfinder and a way leader, just like Eli Stone is in my books, But like, does anybody ever watch Bones, that TV show Bones?
Oh, yeah.
What's the author's name, Maureen?
Oh,
Or
geez.
Sue? Either one of you guys?
Oh.
Anyway,
Oh.
she writes. She's a Canadian author. I was on a panel with her
And
at
she
a
was
voucher con
a-
up in Toronto.
Kathy Wright.
What?
Kathy Wright.
Yeah, okay. And so she's an older lady, right? Okay, and the character she's writing about, is not what's her face, Bones. She's not, there's no FBI people in it.
Brennan.
Yeah. And there's no FBI people in it. She doesn't have an FBI hot dude that's chasing her all over the place. Yeah, so they changed stuff around for these kinds of things. But long story short, that's what happened with the Eli Stone series. So they saw some merit in it, I guess, and I thought it was pretty good. But I did want to show you guys this too, when we go back to the Dog Man for a second. I was showing this to the girls before you all came in. But it's the Great Lakes Pilot. It's one of the papers, it's probably my parent paper now. But I've got like 3 or 4 other newspapers here, and one in Canada, Medicine Hat in Canada, that appears in my column. But have you guys seen a dog that big before? Ever? That was killed in Grand Rapids. That's a big wolf, man. The little backstory to that is that when I got that edition of I was doing the Whittaku at that point in time, and I thought, holy cow! And so I called Mary, she's the editor, and so I said, okay, what's the backstory on this, and can I find out more about it? She said, well, I'll find out what I can. She actually grew up. The guy that was the town barber that shot this wolf in Grand Moranis, and he shot the wolf, and it was the 3rd day or 4th day of deer season. What does it say? 1935 or 30? Whatever it is in there. Big wolf, man. Anyway, he shot that wolf, and he said there were a bunch of does that come through, and so right after that was this big, huge wolf, and it was coming right toward him, and so he shot it twice, and it died right there. It was a huge wolf, and he said the other wolves all bayed right behind it. There was 3 others behind it, and they all bayed. And it's the scariest sound he ever heard in his life or whatever. So anyway, he was the town barber, and is that Flint? Is that where it's at?
Yeah.
Is it Flint? Yeah. So, and that's where Mary's from, so she grew up there. He was the town barber in that town. And he had a barber shop, and she says that we used to sit on that wolf's back all the time because he also had an ice cream. He sold ice cream there. So she was a little kid. She was going to get ice cream. All the kids did. They would see that wolf. Well, the story goes that this guy on the way home, this is back in the 30s, that he had people offering him, $300 or $200 or whatever. Well, that's big money back in the 30s.
Yeah.
But it was also a big, big wolf, and nobody had seen wolves back in those days. And so he said, no, he took it home, got it stuffed, and had it in his barber shop for years and years. And then the Carnegie Foundation had heard about this, and from some of the newspapers up here in the UP. And so they sent a representative over to buy it from him for their museum, the Carnegie Museum, Carnegie Hall. So anyway, they actually bought it and took it to the museum in Pennsylvania, and so that's where it went. He sold it for $500, which is still big money, in the 1930s, late 30s. And so that's where it was. And so she checked to see. Did you see that? Yeah, you've seen that, Sue, didn't you? Yeah. So anyway. So she checked to see where it was when I asked her about it, and and she said that they looked and they said, sure, we got it archived right here. It should be right down the basement. So they went down the basement and went through their whole museum, and it's gone. They had no idea why. So I kind of figured he left. You know what I mean? Got tired of hanging out there and I left. But anyway, so That's a little bit about the
How
dog
can
man
you
that I
lose an
forgot.
8-foot wolf, right? You know, whatever, yeah.
No matter what, that would
Yeah.
scare me from through the woods. I carry a .40 caliber, and I would think, nah, not gonna happen to me. He's gonna eat me. That's a big wolf. But, you know, the Wolfman and the song, if they're dinking it off my website right now, but I've got the song. If nobody's ever heard the song, The Legend of the Dog Man, if nobody's ever heard that song, go to my website. There's cards in here. Did you put cards on? Yeah, cards over there. But go to my website and listen to that song. It's eerie as all get out. It's played all over the internet too. The Legend of the Dog Man. But there's and I didn't talk to this conservation officer myself, but in I don't know what it was, 78, 79, something like that. This lady called and was over by Baldwin. Has anybody heard of Baldwin before? No, so okay. She had something was trying to break into her house, and so she called the cops. And so the cops, you know, said, "What's going on?" She said some kind of a big dog outside.
Yeah.
Well, it was a DNR officer, so he went out there, and he got there. By the time he got there, the thing had left. But he found claw marks, and he found big pad marks in the ground like this. This is a DNR officer, and it's in his official report. So he found these big pad marks, he says, and the claw marks up here like this. The thing would have to stand 7 foot tall when it's on its hind legs.
Wow.
7 foot tall. I'm just saying. So for what it's worth, these are official reports, you know, whether the guy's nuts or not, he actually wrote that down. And having been a cop my whole life and having had to write reports, you always think about what you're saying. You do, because you know that sometime or another it's going to come to
Somebody's
court.
gonna read it.
Well, it's going to be in court. You know, I mean, you're going to have to do it. It's going to be, oh man, I can't tell you how many times. But you think about these kinds of things, but if it's true and it's valid, and you know, back in the 70s, you didn't usually take pictures of something like that. Nowadays, with all the CSI crap we got on TV, which is not true, 99.9% of it. But still, you take a picture of a footprint and those kinds of things. But back in those days, we didn't do that. So, but anyway, so there's so much for that. Now I'm getting ahead of myself again, probably, but I want to tell you about that. So this little book right here has not been published yet. Does anybody know who Steve Hamilton is? Everybody knows? Everybody? Okay, Steve's a pretty good friend of mine. So he reads my books and I read his stuff. And so anyway, I had to write this little book, and so I said, hey, I need to have a Chippewa guy tell my Pukaska guy what Spirit Island means, what the word Spirit Island means, and what connotation it has to the Chippewa people. And so I wanted to know if I could use like Benny LeBlanc. Can I do that?
Oh, yeah.
And she says, heck yeah, go ahead. See, he and I, we met when the first novel came out, The Murmurings. They called me from BoucherCon, and you girls probably know what BoucherCon is, right? The World International Mystery Conference. No? Okay. Anyway, it's where every year it's held someplace different, and that's where everybody's going to be there. So Michael Conley's there, Lee's there. Everybody, Steve's. Every mystery writer that you can imagine, big and small, go there, and it's primarily a fan thing. Most of the people that are there are fans, and they take their vacations for this, believe it or not, and they actually go there just to listen to us talk. A bunch of us up on a big panel, 600 people out in the audience, listen to us talk about different aspects of the writing. I don't understand it, but we do that, or at least we did. Used to go a lot. But anyway, so Steve, when The Murmurings first came out, the first call I got was from this, it had been out for maybe 4 or 5 months. This guy called me and he said, listen, he said, you don't know me. He said, but I'm the president for Michigan MUFON, and I would really like it if you'd be our keynote speaker. The International Symposium is coming up this year. You know what that is?
I know, it sounds wonderful. You were
Yeah, well, it
excited.
sounded kind of weird to me, though. I thought, okay, well, yeah, sure, international. You want to be a keynote speaker? So okay, I said, well, what the heck is MUFON? And I said, it's an international symposium. He said, there will be people here from all over the whole world for MUFON. I said, what is MUFON? He says, it's a mutual UFO network. I said,
Okay.
well, yeah, but we got there with it because Maureen went with me. But there was people there that actually walked around with little things bouncing on their heads.
Sure.
But it went from that to, Stan Friedman was there. I don't know if you know who he is or not. You know who Stan is? Stan and I, Kevin Randall, you know who he is. Jesse Marcel. These are credible people within the UFO ufology, whatever they call it. You got the nuts and the crazies.
Yeah.
Then you actually got people who got PhDs and are pretty savvy. Friedman was a nuclear physicist, but until he retired, that's what he did until he retired. Kevin Randall was an Air Force pilot until he retired. He was in the Army in Vietnam as a pilot. So anyway, so I didn't know what that was, and then shortly after that, then I got a call from this guy in Toronto, and wanted to know if I would be interested in being on a panel, and that's who I was on the panel with. That lady wasn't she one of the ladies on that panel?
I get them mixed up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she was on that panel. Anyway, the author panels are set up like that. You know, you have a bunch of people, and everybody will sit up there, and you you answer questions and you talk about stuff. It's fun. A lot of it's fun. Anyway, we were doing this, and I didn't have any idea what it was. And I said, "What exactly is it?" And she said, and he explained it, and I said, "Oh, well, yeah, I think we can probably do that." And so I went to Toronto the first time, and that's where I met Steve Hamilton. And so we got along pretty good together, and I really like his stuff, and I think he likes mine. But anyway, he said that I could use his character in this. So Vinnie LeBlanc appears in here, and this book is where Eli Stone is the protector for the people, the way leader. This guy is the game warden, or the land protector. These are actual cultural concepts within traditional American Indian culture, for what it's worth. It's just that you never hear about this kind of stuff. So if I'm going to write what I know and what I like and what I believe to be true. So therefore, you get that kind of thing. But there's that. As far as these books go, I think I told you all that, yeah, so she always, when she first came home from the hospital, I mean, she was afraid of death's door the whole time, but she would watch every episode of The Rifleman that was. You know, all the bonanzas, you know, so it's just like the Western stuff. So I was sitting there with her most of the time, didn't have anything else to do. So I wrote this little book, and this one here is called Seamus Gilley, U.S. Secret Service in Medicine Hat. And what this book is just a little historical fiction. It is an actual historical fiction, so it fits all the criteria for that. But it's also a Western. It's set in 1868, but it has a really neat little old Blackfoot oral story in it about the town of Seven Persons. So you want me to tell you that little story or no?
Yeah.
You still got time for this kind of thing? So I just run my mouth.
Maybe just one more.
Just one more?
In other words, I'm winding down.
Okay, so oral story within traditional American Indian culture. Nobody wrote anything down, so you didn't know anything about it. Louder?
No, quickly.
Wind it up.
Kind of quickly. I'm just
Okay.
saying.
Yeah, just go on. Okay, so here's.
I guess we're going to have to get the signal straight before we start.
I'll do this one real quick.
Sign language.
So-
Green flag like on NASCAR.
Yeah, and some of the, when she does this, I don't understand what that
Green roll is flag in NASCAR means close it up.
means. That's what it means?
Yeah.
What does yellow mean? Okay.
Give me yellow.
I never got the checkered either. Okay, so anyway, this one, for what it's worth, is I'll just do that real quick. This is a little one that I wanted to write just because I had an idea, and it was a nice little story. But it did win the Distinguished Honor Award from the Military Writers Society of America. And it's a little story about the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And it's basically no big mystery going on. It's a military adventure, a thriller, they call them now. It's a military adventure, but they call it a thriller. So I want to tell you about that. That's that one. And then, to get back to this story, just because it's so neat, I'll get back to this real quick. Okay, so whenever I can, like I told you, I'll stick a little story within the story or some other true history or the stuff that I can find. So this is Seamus Gilley. It explains the ghillie suit. If anybody ever wants to know about the history of the ghillie suit and how it came to be. So it explains that. Now this guy's half Choctaw and half white, and that white side is his Irish side. So anyway, there's a little town in Alberta, Canada called Seven Persons. And the way that it got its name is from the Blackfoot culture. But now you have to go back and you have to add to this. In other words, you have to read between the lines, because in oral culture, all you're getting is a story. There's a lot of times there's not a lot of stuff. There's not much fat between those lines. You know, you pretty much have to figure it out for yourself. So it goes like this. We do know that there had been a battle between this band of this war party of Blood, Blackfeet, and the Cree. Now, there's two septs within the Blackfoot Nation, the Piegan and the Blood. I'm a Kispoko Shawnee, that's the warrior sept, but we have a farmer sept and we have a, what's the other?
Just other stuff.
Anyway, within the Blackfoot Nation, it's the Blood and the Piegan. So the chief's name for this little war party was Yellow Calf Shirt. We know that because that's told orally. I've heard this story orally. So we know that his name was Yellow Calf Shirt. It does come into white culture, but right now we're just talking about the oral culture of the Blackfoot. They had been in a battle with the Cree and they knocked the snot out of them. So everybody was pumped up. A lot of adrenaline. They beat the Cree pretty bad. Now Indians didn't name trees and creeks and stones and rocks like white people do. They just didn't. It was just a tree, a creek, a stone, or a rock. You talk about a trace, you know, you would take this trace, the trace to such and such, the trail to such and such. Anyway, so they came to this stream, And at this stream, on the other side of the stream, there are these 7 small hairless bodies, and they're just laying there dead. It doesn't say if they're dressed or not dressed. It doesn't say if they're male or female. It doesn't say, anything more than that they're very small in stature, small hairless bodies, and they're dead. So you don't know anything about this. But Yellow Calf Shirt decides that this is big medicine. He wants to watch this. Now these guys are all hepped up, like I said, in the adrenaline, so they're, whatever you want to do, Chief, sounds good to me. So they pitch camp, and so they sit there. So 7 nights pass, and Yellow Calf Shirt decides nothing has changed, it is bad medicine. Okay, so 7 nights passed, why would it all of a sudden be bad medicine if nothing has changed? Unless maybe it was summertime, in which case, after 7 days, 7 dead bodies would smell bad. You'd had something would have changed. Bloating would happen, you gotta read between the lines. But anyway, he ate boogies, that's it, bad medicine. After 7 days, nothing has changed, is what the story says, and they take off. So that's it. Time passes, we don't know how much time passes, but moons is what it says. Many moons have passed. That's a month. Okay, so many moons have passed. Now, we don't know this chief's name, but it was a hunting party, and they had killed many antelope. Okay, which means, again, these guys were pretty hepped up. They were pretty excited. It's not like everybody thinks. It was tough to be an Indian in the old days. Most people didn't make it through the winter, So if you had a successful hunt, especially if it was a really successful hunt, you were extremely fortunate. The Master of Life had blessed you greatly. So he decided that, much to most folks might not realize this, but we had a moral code. Whatever was bad medicine before has been long enough now. We should go bury those 7 bodies, because Indians did that. They would go bury the 7 bodies. It's the right thing to do. Now this particular area of Alberta is very rocky. The soil has very little soil, and it's all rocky. So burials were done pretty much with cairns, and everybody knows what those are, right?
Right.
You've seen it in Matt Dillon all the time, Chester, and they're burying up those rocks. Okay, so that's what they were going to do. They were going to go bury these 7 bodies. But when this band of Piegan Blackfoot get there, this little hunting party, nothing has changed. These 7 bodies have not changed. Super bad medicine. It goes right now. That's it. And I mean, word spreads like wildfire. No creek, nobody. I mean, you don't get any Sioux, you won't get any Cheyenne, you won't get anybody who will go anywhere near that place whatsoever, even a little bit. No Fox, nobody. It's bad medicine. Forever. We don't know how long forever is, but we know that the whites have not been there yet, because all this is oral story. The very first whites that come into this area are Mormons. And this is where the documentation starts. This historical that you can actually find that is not oral story. So the very first whites get there, and they don't speak any Indian. The Indians don't speak any white. Everything's done with pidgin and sign, and that's how I started this, with sign. So they're trying to explain what's going on. And the only thing the Mormons get is that there are 7 dead bodies that need to be buried. So they go and they find these 7 dead bodies and they bury them. They write this in their Bibles, but they don't say that there's anything wrong with them, which makes you again think, all these moons have passed, plus more moons have passed, and the bodies still haven't changed. They look fresh and dead to these guys. So there's something pretty odd about this. Anyway, this stream is now called 7 Persons, because the Mormons name it 7 Persons. There's been 7 persons. The little town that grows up there, 7 persons. And so these 7 small bodies are buried in a big rock pile, rock cairn right there. And so the newspaper starts, and references are made through the years to the 7 small bodies. They assume they were Indian, I guess, I don't know. Doesn't really say much in that kind of stuff as far as the research I did. But these 7 bodies are there, and as time goes on, time passes, and it continues to go on. And then the train comes through. The railroad's coming through, and it's going to come right through where the burial cairn is. So they're going to have to reinter those bodies. So they go out to move all the rocks, and they do move all the rocks, but the bodies are gone. And so there you go. That's also documented that. Now I get a kick out of that, because where'd they go? But anyway, that's within this little thing here, and how it all kind of jives together one way or the other. But it's just for you guys to figure out. But that's the gist of it, I guess. I'm running out of time, ain't I? Okay, anybody have any questions real quick? Anything that I can answer? Not all at once. Ma'am.
Okay, it's not about your books or anything, but my husband had this question, and he's like, I wonder. I go, well, I'll find out. July 2nd, the Lone Ranger with Johnny Depp is coming out. He was like, oh, okay, we're up in the Sioux. He wonders what the Native American, or the Indians would feel about Johnny Depp's portrayal of an Indian.
Well, Johnny Depp, Johnny Depp's Cherokee. Did you know that?
He is.
No, he actually is. He got almost a quarter. Not that it matters, but
right.
Here's the deal, ma'am. I mean, and back, yeah, I know. Back during the Clinton administration, they determined that all Indians should be Native Americans. Before that, we've always been American Indians. I'm fine being a Native American. We're probably fine being a Native American, right? I mean, you were born here.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody born here is a Native American. It's just, I don't think there's that much to it. My wife she got a book, I forget what that's called, the book about the Indian doctor, the Navajo girl.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, it's really interesting. I was reading some of this, probably about a month or so ago, and she talks about how when she was a kid growing up, they would watch TV, just like it was when I was a kid. And all the Indians on TV, like I said, well, you watch Indians on TV, that's not me, that's not us,
Right.
And we go out to play, nobody wanted to be the Indian, nobody, I mean, you play cowboys and nobody wanted to be the Indian. Well, it's because the Indians just see on TV, We didn't have the culture that like they would have out in Montana or Wyoming, where the reservations were all put someplace and made to stay. Other than the fact they pulled the kids out and made them go to to white schools and that kind of stuff. We didn't have that kind of we just integrated within the society. So I don't have a lot of bad feelings about that. My dad came from Tennessee in the 1940s, came from Muskegon because that's where the jobs were. And down there, everybody claimed a little Indian. There's nothing to be, you might not want to be black guy, but being Indian was fine. Nobody had a problem with that. And my grandmother, I won't get into that. Anyway, so he'd come to Muskegon and he'd be in line at these big foundry jobs. There's black guys in front of him, Mexican guys and white guys. They're hiring him left, right, sideways. And on an application, like his draft card, I got his draft card, it's check Indian. And so I get, he gives her his application and they look at it and say, Indian? We ain't hiring no stinking Indians, get out of here. So he had to say he was Mexican or he had to say he was white in order to get a job. That's just the way that things were. And you can, traditional Indians, I almost can guarantee we're not going to have any problem with Johnny Depp. Traditional Indians. When I say traditional, I mean there are some folks who are more liberal than others or more modern or whatever you want to call it. But most Indians don't call themselves Native Americans. Most Indians call themselves Indians. So Johnny Depp's just doing a job, more or less. I'm kind of interested to see how he's going to do with this, but I don't have a problem with that. And Dances with Wolves is probably the best thing that ever happened to us. It was a really good movie because it was fairly accurate as far as how the culture was and what happened and what didn't happen. But a lot of the other stuff that goes on, is not accurate. And with Johnny Depp and what he's doing, from my point of view, and I think most traditional American Indians, it won't be a problem. I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of how I feel about it. Ma'am?
I have a question. We have a creative endeavors group here that are writers. And so I'm interested to hear you say that you don't use an outline when you're writing. Did I hear you say that?
You did.
Okay. And also, it sounded like you have some trouble with actually writing. Is this true or not true?
As far as being able to spell my name
form
thing?
of writing, yeah.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, because you have a hard time with writing your name sometimes.
Yeah, I have a terrible time with that.
Yeah.
A dangling participle to me means that he's going to fall. That's what it means.
Okay.
It doesn't mean anything else. I don't have a clue what it means.
Okay.
And now we were at the Kuwait Casino this morning, then I got to go back there again tomorrow. The folks that like my stories, I think like them because of the way that I write. What's bad about my stories is that I write the same way that people talk.
I love that.
Well, yeah, I mean, in this book, there's a couple from Big Bay. They got character names. They went through the bone marrow transplant. He didn't make it. He had leukemia. He didn't make it. But they were. I think they were fans. I didn't even know they were fans before this. But this because they said you talk like we do, eh? But it's because you talk, or because I'm writing, and I do. And somebody walks in, I stood here, I stand there. Well, there's different tenses to that. This is what she's at me all the time. People don't talk that way. People will talk the way that I just did. I stood there for a second, then I stand over here, and I don't know what's going on. That's the way normal people talk. In my fat little head, I'm just spinning out the way that I see it and the way that I would hear it. So some folks like that, and I suppose there's a lot that don't too, but for
But he
the
has a
most
lot
part,
of
that's
editing
it.
done afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I really can't spell very good, though. I do have to put my driver's license to read my
That's
name
interesting.
properly.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, that's how that goes for me. And if you like the story, and that's really, for me, that's all this is about, is telling a story. If you like the story, good. And if you don't, that's okay too. I'm just telling a story. So-
Do you write on a computer, or do you actually physically write it out, or?
I'm not Nelson DeMille, boy. That's one of my favorite writers, though, Nelson is. I write on a computer, but I started out on a typewriter and then went to a word processor for that, but I write on a computer. But I mean, like somebody asked me the other day, said, do you ever have to, do you think of something you have to go write down? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
On a napkin or a piece of paper or anything you can find. If you can, if you can't, then you try to save it and pick it up later. But once for me, it's like a little demon that lives inside my head. Once the story's there, and I see that, it's got to be fleshed out, but the whole story's there, beginning to end, beginning, middle, end. It's all in my head, and it's all there, so, and then I get this little guy in there going, now, I want to tell the story, and I can, it drives you nuts like that. The whole time we've been up here, her and I are driving on the road talking, but that story's playing in my background, in my head. Lucifer's Wedge is what's going on right now. Yeah, but I just got the rights for the cover for number 5, which is called The Deceiver. Her mom was born and raised on Beaver Island, so she wants the next book to be set there. So it's a really cool cover, though. It's a picture of a crab spider on a sunflower, and he's just got this bumblebee. It's called the next book's gonna be called Deceiver. But you can't. You had to look close and holy crap! And it's just but the guy that took it, he's like 75 years old, and so I hunted him down and said, look, I really want to use this for a cover for the book because covers are important to me. I don't care if they're not important.
They're beautiful. Your covers are beautiful.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you like them, but seriously, ma'am, I wouldn't care if you didn't. I'm happy with them. And in my mind, that's part of what I'm doing here. And we were just looking like I'm reading. Craig Johnson's got The Serpent's Tooth. I'm looking at the cover and I'm thinking, geez, man, he doesn't have anything to do with it because the marketers do that. The publisher. I'm sorry, Sue, I'm getting too long in it.
Yes.
But the publishers do all that, and they go by demographics, whatever their arts and crafts people or whatever they got. So it doesn't have anything to do with. But for me, when I did this cover, actually this cover, the girl who painted this is an actual oil painting that I have at home. But this was back in 2003, so it was before we had the copy machines and all that kind of stuff. But she would sketch it out for me, and then she would fax me the picture. And say, we need more of this, we need more of that, more water here, or whatever. And I'd fax it back to her. That's how we did that. And then she painted the oil painting. This one I just superimposed. That's an actual drawing that I did of this ZSS Shenandoah. But I found this picture of Hawaii, and that was what I wanted. It's like a ghost,
Really neat.
So I did that, and then this is just what you would actually see in the Michigan dog man, because half spiritual is Indian, the other spiritual is the dog, and obviously that's just 3rd and 3rd division. So blah blah blah.
Cool.
Yeah. So anyway, okay. Anything else?
When is the water spirit book going to be out?
Boy, ma'am, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. If I don't get off my tail and actually get an agent to do something, I'll just publish it I won't just publish it. But there's 2 or 3 places that will publish it, like Whiskey Creek Press. They do all my electronic books. The ebook readers or whatever. And so I can just give it, and they'll take it. They're happy to get anything like that for me. So I'll just give it to them, just because I don't want it to set. And then my domestic boss will kick me for that. So, but I would rather have it be out there and somebody either liking it or not liking it, rather than just have it.
I'll watch for it.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. That was set in La Chenot, Cedarville,
neat.
all in Cedarville, and then out on Goat Island, goes right from there to the Porcupines. So this one, he'll probably always be in the UP, most likely. Any other questions, folks?